end of it, it's all just like reconnecting to that like universal energy that is bigger than us. And the alignment with that energy is creative source.
This is A Mutant Manifesto, episode 32. I have friend of the show, Ahnika, Berg, with me in the studio for the first time. The second ever in-person episode, and my first at the microphone that I've used for all the other episodes.
Sweet.
Except for one.
Yeah, glad to be here.
How's it going? Welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah, we just did one, or the last one that I've recorded was with you, and that was one of the Frozen Horizon ones. And we talked about arts, activism, and the erotics of attunement, essentially. And on today's episode, I wanted to get more into like your body of work, because we kind of ended that episode wandering a little bit away from activism. I mean, it's all combined as we discussed there, but we started to talk about. I mean, what we left undiscussed was sort of like the deeper threads that have to do with these currents or like ley lines of attunement and how they get channeled and how you can discover them or like work with them. And I wanted to talk about that through the lens of your work. You've got a book that you've been working on that's been, as we've discussed, kind of this like process of between editing and letting it be and like accepting it as it is, maybe. Mm-hmm. And then within that book itself, there's a lot of like photography, like nature photography and self-portraiture and like self-writing that connects to larger political and social threads. Mm-hmm. And so I guess within all of that, there might emerge some sort of discussion about the local or the particular reflecting the larger or the universal. Mm-hmm. Those are the kinds of threads that we wanted to talk about today. Mm-hmm. But yeah, just, now that we've kind of introduced now that we've introduced some of the theses that might sprout up in this conversation, how's it going today? How are you doing?
It's good. Yeah. I'm flowing with what's existing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You are in town after a ski trip that you took in
Utah.
Utah, right? Yeah.
I was meeting some wonderful friends and had a bit of a vacation, which feels really good. And just like a bit of mental space away from a bunch of things. I feel like that's really important to sometimes get like a more aerial view on everything and then bring it back, connect it, and dive back in more aligned. Yeah.
I want to talk about like, I want to go right away. I'm like kind of instinctively going to a kind of a well-trodden territory in a lot of thought, which is like the idea that you can step into nature, you can go on a nature walk, or a ski trip, or you can, as you do, also like you can go out onto the ice on Lake Superior or whatever, or, and take pictures. And all those things are like ways to like feed you inspiration pretty quickly. It's like kind of, this is the thing that I guess, I don't know, there's something about, this thing that we call nature giving people inspiration.
That's a time-old concept.
Yeah.
Is just, I think you connect to something bigger than yourself. You are able to like forget the little boundary of your mind and like just recognize other life. Nature is ultimate medicine, and there's so much science backing everything that it does for like our mental and spiritual like wellness.
Yeah, I think it's like everything has an ecosystem. And so, like, I think that, like, I think people are, generally speaking, evolved to appreciate, and, it's an evolutionary advantage to appreciate and connect with your surroundings. So it makes sense that we would feel enlivened by that process, that act. Mm-hmm. and I guess we can think in a more broad sense, like about different types of deconstructed ecologies that we navigate, and that just like feels good to go on these like excursions where we're just ambling through them without like without having a direct focus or anything.
Totally.
But I think that it makes sense to maybe like kind of situate this whole conversation kind of around your book, if you don't mind, so we can kind of like find offshoots through that.
Yeah.
Can you summarize what the book is?
Yeah, so I've been describing it as like visual poetic essay, right? So it's a combination of photographic imagery, which is nature, which is abstract, it's self-portraiture, and then poetry that goes along with that, and the combination of design. The reason I love the format of a book is because it creates this like contextual meaning, like images in a row in a sequence create more meaning than an image alone, even though they do say that an image is 1,000 words. But along with all of the other components of the medium, it tells a more complete story. And it's really about my journey through mental health struggles, finding like context within like systems crumble within capitalism, within like patriarchy and racism, and my experience like growing up as a woman in this world, and it brings that line through into like energetics and inspiration and the creative process, and about finding deeper truth and meaning in this life. That's what it comes around to, from realizing like not thinking there's any meaning and like kind of wanting to die because of that, to finding meaning and finding purpose and connection and like cultivating that in life. It's a real journey. It's a portal of a book.
Portal of a book. I like that. I mean, yeah. I mean, okay. So I mean, you know, we were just having a little we were just having a quick walk before we sat down to record this, and you mentioned the idea, this like sort of like quantum physics / qigong idea of like tiny things being portals.
Yeah.
Can you...
Well, I'm really fascinated by physics, particularly because the whole problem of physics is trying to reconcile general relativity, which is the physics of the really big, with quantum mechanics, which is the physics of like the minutely small. And people have been trying to find the theory that fits them all forever. And so they've landed on string theory. And within string theory, there's this one little concept where a string, the radius of the string, when next to another string that is looped over itself, picture like a ponytail holder that you wrap around your finger and it's like looping around something multiple times. The radius of that string is going to be the inverse of the radius of the first string that isn't looped. And the physical properties of the worlds that those strings exist in are the exact same. And that blows my mind right there. Like, it might not seem like something that big, but we're saying that the inverse of something is the same as something. And there's this concept in Qigong, Spring Forest Qigong in particular, where they say that I am in the universe is in my body, the universe and I combine. And it creates this beautiful tension of the really small and the really big, like being one. And that physical feeling of that like tension coexisting feels like dropping in deeper energetically. There's a line in my book that I shared with Jackie, which is, go through your body to lose yourself, to reach infinity, touch divinity. And we were discussing how your body can act as like a portal to like reach beyond, reach like spirituality, reach deeper, higher connection in a way.
I think that there's a connection between that idea of like the body, the local, because like the body it just locates consciousness. That's essentially what it does. I mean, like, in addition to having its own properties, of course, like its biological properties, it also just like
what locates do you mean by
spirit.
That? Locates consciousness.
Locates spirit. Locates consciousness. Like
wow.
The body, the experience of the body as in like your body or my body, is like it's just like one of it's like a localization. Not necessarily, but I mean, okay, maybe what I mean to say is that, like, that's the way that we are, that's the default consensus understanding of the body in Western thought, or perhaps, you know, the world today, largely speaking.
Like intelligence as a concept, is that what you're talking about?
I'm saying that the body is the thing that locates awareness. Like, you know, you can experience awareness in a non-localized way, where you're just kind of, like, tripping out or whatever, or where you're just kind of in a space that is more crystalline, or that's more, psychedelic or transcendent. And you can also experience intelligence in a way that is disembodied. You can experience like logic in a way that's disembodied. Mm-hmm. But the body is the thing that locates awareness, locates intelligence, puts you in a specific context. Right?
Sure.
And so, but I think that, like, so basically, I think that there's kind of the individual, like, situated in a individual body is kind of one of the keys to the liberal, and I don't mean like, I don't mean like liberal versus conservative. I mean like the kind of like liberal control regime that we have in this current era. The Foucault's kind of sense of, power being something that operates through systems, that fix bodies and individuals into regimes of control. But I feel like the individual body, is one of the important regulatory technologies within that context. Essentially, like, what your body does, what my body does, what your body signifies, what my body signifies. Those things being kind of the most important thing that you can work on as an individual. And that can be kind of something that feels imprisoning and can oftentimes create anti-solidaristic thinking, and it's the thing that atomizes us and keeps us separate. But also, I think that what's interesting about this idea is that the same sort of force that like within that context, within just the self, which is like as an isolated being, you can find a transcendent kind of like ecological understanding, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think that there's something interesting about like delving into the self and turning that into a book that crystallizes the individual, like it's a droplet of water being crystallized into a snowflake or something that can then refract meaning in different ways. I don't know.
Yeah, something that like brings to mind for me is this concept of self. Like, it can be a very like egoic concept. When we think of ourselves, we often think of like that voice in our minds that like is our ego. It is our perception of our body and all of that. But really, like, refracting the self in the way that I'm like exploring through the book is like finding self not in just ego, but like expanding it to find it in everything, like in the nature that I'm interacting with. Like, that is the whole thing, is that like you are nothing to the universe, but you are everything to like the microcosm within your body. And it's not the self that is the ego, it's the self that is a body on earth connected to everything.
the self versus the ego is interesting to me, like, because I was thinking about recently, I was thinking about, like, basically when I was cleaning, actually, my wall the other day, I was, I did kind of a ritual while I was, like, cleaning the wall. I was like, okay, like, while I clean this wall, I did, like, it would, like, literally, the magic that works the best for me is, like, literally just, like, quick. You can't give it too much fake respect. It just has to be like, okay, I'm doing this. But anyway, so, like, yeah, so it's just, like, a 10-minute thing, but I was trying to figure out, like, where, like, the dirt that builds up on the wall, right? Like, where have my interactions with others, where are they, like, negative, where am I feeding negative interactions, right? Mm. And as I went through that, by the time you get to the bottom of it, I've gone through all the different levels of, ways that my interactions with individuals in my life might be adverse to them or to me. I was kind of focusing on it being adverse to them. And by the time I got to the end of it, I was kind of like you get to a point where you're like, okay, well, there's all these systems. Like, after you address all the different ways that you as an individual are treating people negatively or whatever, you start to come to a realization, well, there's systemic patterns at play here. And then I started to get to this point of this ego erasure thing, which I think is pretty common for a lot of, like, so many people who have done psychedelics or who are into Western occultism or who are into occultism in general or esotericism or spirituality. They talk about, getting outside of your ego, like, get rid of your ego. And I think, once again, it's important to focus on that because, like I already laid out, I mean, like, yeah, the self, the individual, is a like, regulatory technology. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that we don't have egos and we don't have selves. And that doesn't mean that there can't be, like, another thing that the Moon Manifesto is not an innocent project. It's not interested in innocence. And therefore, if there's fun or interesting things to be had or experimented with the ego and with the individual, then, yeah, we should do it. And I was thinking about, actually, how a lot of the times, like, people dismiss fashion as, like, a lot of, like, men or whatever dismiss, like, fashion as something that's, like, frivolous and unnecessary in a similar way that people sometimes dismiss the ego and the self. Like, I think that these things, and, like, yes, it's like, of course they can be used as technologies of whatever, but it's also like, since we have that technology, that doesn't mean that it has to be used that way. Now, there's all sorts of different, like, weird angles there, but, like, I don't know. I guess I'm just thinking, like, basically, I think the book, the autobiography, the process of autobiography, the process of, like, writing about yourself and photography, even, like, self-portraiture and all that stuff, I think that that's, like, a really interesting way to navigate being equipped with the self in in the context of trying to understand larger societal structures. And you also talked about this process of going from a place of, like, a feeling of meaninglessness and futility and potentially, like, isolation and everything, and then going through a process of negotiating with the pressures that were encountering in yourself that were from other sources, and that allowing you to develop a larger understanding and a political awareness that enlivened you and made you like, want to actually live on your own terms. Would you be interested in, like, talking more about that? Like, maybe starting with that, like, sense of meaninglessness? Was that an isolated time in your life?
Yeah, that was super isolating. I felt, like, completely alone and, like, nobody really knew who I was. And I had a lot of panic attacks, and honestly, those all felt like little deaths of, like, certain parts of me. And this is a really big line through the book, but, like, every time that you go through that, you realize that, like, you're still alive and that you have a body and that things can't necessarily get worse in that moment. And you really come to acute awareness of like your breathing. Like it feels like being like slapped awake, and it feels like almost like really, really questioning what got you there and like whether that is worth it in your life. But there's also that line of like a lot of the things that got me to that point were like really unhelpful messages about like what it meant to be a woman, including like what I was supposed to wear, how I was supposed to act, like including like my experience having a period and like the pain of that and like the health complications of that being not taken seriously or like brushed under the rug, or even not even being able to like talk about it at all, period. The way that I've talked about it is like realizing that those things don't serve you, that those things brought you to that really dark place, makes you question them on such a deep level. It makes you question like your concept of gender and like what it is to be a man and a woman and express that, and like other concepts of like the structures that like aren't helpful for you. And it becomes a really, really powerful thing to question the rules of society on that level, on multiple levels within all of the structures that exist, because a person who knows which rules that they live by and decides consciously which rules that they are choosing for themselves and which they reject from society becomes a person who's like inherently subversive and dangerous to the systems that need people to stay in line. Anybody can like love up on pussy. Anybody can wear a strap and like embody the energy of a cock. Anybody can like wear a dress that has nothing to do with like your gender assigned at birth. And the line there is that like when you feel that like gender or sexuality euphoria, when you're like in balance with like when your inside and outside are in balance, and you get that like click and that pleasure that comes through that. The pleasure is the subversive part. The living in joy is the subversive part that you can find in that.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, once again, there's this idea of alignment there, which I think is really interesting, and I think that that's... Okay, I think that that plays into this idea of sequencing that you brought up earlier with your book, right? Each page, each like snapshot, each verse that you put in is in conversation with what came before and what goes after. But, I mean, they could also be looked at random. There always is possible for somebody to open the book at random.
Totally.
And just in general, they do exist, like we were saying with this whole quantum entanglement thing. Like each page is bound to the same book, right? So each part is part of the whole, even if it's traditionally read in sequence. But the point that I'm trying to bring up is that arrangement itself being connected to alignment. This idea of artifice, or maybe that's not quite the right word for it, but choosing or orchestrating or arranging, being connected to alignment, some sort of like navigation of the different parts that create something that channels a current. I don't know. What?
Okay, so there's a page in the book where I literally pulled like a scientific theory article, peer-reviewed article, that's about orchestrated quantum state reduction. So we're thinking about the concept of like quantum wave collapse, which is the concept of like looking at an electron and its wave function collapses, right? It becomes... The wave-particle duality just becomes like a particle that we're witnessing.
Yeah, when it's observed, yeah.
Yes, and that is the alignment. I would argue that like the being seen is the deep presence, is the energetic alignment, is the pleasure that like creates the rush of energy that moves through, that is all the same concept of like, it can be orchestrated, and it can also be, it can like hit you out of nowhere, like a rush. It can be a high. But at its core, like, creating a channel for energy to flow through involves aligning strings to like allow energy to flow. Creating a pathway for the channel, for like the current.
You're saying that like it can hit you in different ways. Like it can hit you in different ways. It can hit your body, it can hit yourself, it can hit your soul or spirit, you, in different ways.
Yeah.
But then there's also ways to transmit that. Is that what you're saying? Like,
yeah.
And that's through like the arranging and like the like sequencing and the editing.
Yeah, I would say that like what we're talking about of like being hit by it is that like strike of inspiration that people think about, or even some people would refer to it as like seeing God, right? They have this moment of like euphoria come out of nowhere,
divine inspiration.
And I also think that you can systematically like create the environment for that to happen more often by creating alignment in your life, in your world, in your body as well. Like clearing your space, your mind, your body, so that you are flowing in the direction of your intention, if that makes sense. Yeah.
I think that there's something really interesting about scale here. Obviously we were discussing this idea of the hyper-local, the smallest thing you can find has like dimensions within it. There's also the idea that brought up, that's referenced sometimes, I don't know where exactly it comes from, but like the Indra's net idea that essentially every single little pinpoint contains all of the information of the rest of everything that's connecting to it, which is essentially everything. So like every little droplet of anything has enough information to generate the rest of the reality, or a reality's worth of information. But that's, these are like, you can go to extremes with these things of like, oh, the scale is meaningless, but I think that from our lived experience, having selves in this reality, I think that scale is definitely worthwhile to discuss. So like, and that's maybe part of why I brought up this idea of fashion, and part of why I brought up the idea of the self to begin with. Because I do think that there's something useful in the technology of the self and like the scales. And I think also, it's also kind of funny that we should be talking about this because we are in my house, and I recently became a homeowner because of I'm just trying to build equity. It's that simple. It's a concrete material decision of mine. All these things. But then also, once you have a house, it's like, okay, I have, and this is true of anyone who has any space that they live in. It's like, you have some degree of sovereignty. Obviously, I don't have, none of us have that much degree of sovereignty, but we do have some ability to curate something. And I guess that's something that I've been, it's been coming up for me. It's like, okay, if I took from the Frozen Horizon series this idea that care itself is a very, that's a thing that I need to study more, and it's a revolutionary trend, a revolutionary thing, the question still becomes with your own space, and that even if you don't have your own space, that applies to your own body to some degree. How do you find a way to care for it in your own way, in a way that's attuned and aligned with your own self? You can't apply care that is self-effacing necessarily without risking collapsing into something that isn't truly care in all its forms. So I guess do you have any wisdom to shed on that? Essentially this idea of curation and I don't know. Is this even a question? I think that I'm it just is I think that this is just something I've been thinking about a lot. And I do think that having a practice that's about the self, and it's about like creating a work of art that venerates your experiences, it does require like a lot of like sitting with things in a combination with curating and arranging those things. I don't know. And then I guess the next thing I was going to say is that, and you know, I'm talking a lot, but whatever. I don't know, like, then there's like the other scales of that. There's the self, there's the like the way that you hold your body, the way that you like breathe, the way that you experience your internal rhythms. There's also the way that you dress. There's also the way that you curate your like space around you. If you have an altar or anything like that, the way that you arrange that. Mm-hmm. And then there's the way that you exist in your neighborhood. And then there's the way that you exist in your ecosystem, mm-hmm. and, you know, etc. There's all those things are like, you have various sovereignty on those different registers, mm-hmm. and I feel like there's a utility to navigating those.
Okay. So scale is something that I like think about a lot. I think that things become more clear and more true when they can span many scales. So like when something is very true on the individual, and when it stands the test of like expanding to the collective, when it can be true on like the quantum like particular scale, and when it can be also true for like a universe, like those things stand the test of scale. And also like the universe and matter echoes itself on many scales. But I like this concept of curating and like creating and not controlling, but like aligning what is within your control, because that has a lot to do with like my personal creative practice. Like I can tend to isolate myself. In the past, I've done that a lot, specifically because I'm really just focusing on what is within my realm. Like what's within my control, what I want to focus on. And sometimes for me, focusing on that requires blocking everything else out. But it allows me to think about how I can really get creative. It creates the space to like think expansively about the things that I am focusing on, that like I am like looking at directly. And a lot of people like to think that they're not like a creative person, but creativity is and can be applied to every single area of our lives. Like when I think about being a creative, I'm not only just like thinking about the piece of art that I'm working on, I'm also thinking of like, how can I make my next meal in a way that aligns with like my values and goals for like what I want to put in my body. Like how am I structuring my day in a way that is like actually meeting all of the areas of my life that I want to tend to, and how am I like creating a vibe for myself, like how am I creating joy and pleasure in my own life so that I can like then show up as I want to show up. And that brings it to the next scale, is like I spent a few years like genuinely pretty isolated so that I could like get a handle on myself and like my energy, and like get to a place within that where I wanted to be. And now I really feel like I'm very comfortable expanding that a little bit to a larger scale, and like I stay rooted in myself and my space when I'm interacting with my community and my city at large.
That's cool. Like on our previous episode together, like we were talking about like the importance for you, and probably for a lot of people, of like taking breaks from activism in order to get back into it with like a true alignment. Mm-hmm. And for you, those breaks often were you making art, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, I'm interested in this idea of like creativity as a break, but also like needing to take breaks from creativity. Because I think that you've talked about that, I know, on your like social media and stuff. Mm-hmm. That's something that I found actually kind of inspiring is someone to like really own that as part of the creative cycle, right? They're like taking breaks. So I feel like there's two things there. I feel like on one hand, I would be interested in hearing more about like I think the main thing that I wanted to respond to is this idea that you took kind of like like an underworld journey from the world of, or I mean, I don't really mean underworld necessarily, but you took a break from the world. You like to isolate. You like to take these moments where you're like, I'm going to delve. Actually, it kind of makes sense as an underworld, because if you think about the underworld as something that's contracted, and I feel like if you are going into yourself, if you're isolating, that's a contraction moment,
That's
right?
a cool way to think
and it's
about
lower in some sense.
Yeah.
I don't mean that as judgment. I just mean that as
I see it as kind of like turning deeper within myself.
Yeah, deeper.
Deeper is an interesting way to think of like underworld. I like that.
Yeah. And right, so there's like the internal break that you take. But then like you emerge. So what's interesting about that though is that we're saying that there's like some kind of alignment that you can find there. I guess my question is, do you find that when you take those breaks, right, when you cut off from the world for a little bit, when you find an alignment that works there, and maybe we can talk more about what alignment really feels like for people who don't know what we're talking about. But when you find that alignment, do you find that when you re-enter the world, do you find that it is in conversation with the alignment that you found in private? Or not really?
Yeah. It becomes the grounded space that I move through my life in.
So it's like it's a different, it is in conversation because you are in conversation with worlds, and it equips you in different ways to navigate the world in a more attuned way.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, what was your earlier question?
I wanted to emphasize and kind of hone in on what is the importance and the like utility. I don't want to be like utilitarian about taking breaks, and it's like it feels like it's this opportunity to realign with yourself, which then therefore allows you to navigate more faithfully to that in your outside world.
Okay. I think of everything in cycles, right? So when we're thinking about creativity, you have these like energetic go moments, and you also have like the moments where you're doing nothing that are still serving the creativity, like sleeping and resting and like going to talk to your friends, and anything that you're doing that isn't actively like working on the creativity is actually working on it in the background, and that's not like perceived as productivity, but it is an essential part of it. And the other side of that is that like not all of the creative process is for production. Like a really, really good significant portion of it is just expression wildly, and it can't be done with expectation. Like creativity for the sake of just like play and for the sake of expressing truth without any sense of like perfecting it is like sacred. And to create from that place of like I'm enjoying the process, I'm like exploring parts of myself rather than thinking about the end result, like the thing that I'm publishing, or even like just keeping social media in my mind, that tends to like taint what I'm actually creating. It like infringes upon like actually the process of creating.
I like that, because I think that it makes sense that something should be like, you can't, there's no one state. You can't stay in one state. Like, it has to be a cycle, that like a wheel or something. Like, because if you figure that out, then your creativity can become a break from your activism, so to speak, and from your social world, which can become taxing. And then you can emerge from the creativity, or the insular moment into like refreshed into your activism and into your social sphere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But then also within the creativity itself, you're saying that there's a cycle there too. Like within your creative life, you can't always be seeking publication or good reviews or popularity, but sometimes it's okay to do that. Yeah. And also you need to take breaks from the creativity itself. You need to take breaks from the creativity, which is where the rest of the world comes in. You're stepping into the world.
Yeah.
So it's like it is like a kind of like a season. It's like an ecology of work styles or of like forms of work or rest or just an ecology of lifestyles.
Yeah, I think when we forget about like the rest side of that, or like just balancing our life in that way, where that kind of is just like a micro scale of like how patriarchy perpetuates, because we're thinking about like forgetting about the rest cycle, which is very feminine compared to like the doing, action-oriented masculine side of it. And we're forgetting about like the death that has to happen for change and rebirth to cycle through. And everything is a cycle. Everything comes back around, And seeking balance within life in that way is like just how I actually maintain creativity. I also think of balance in terms of like physicality and spirituality. So like the creative process is like a very energetically charged thing for me. It's like pulling ideas into the physical, and that I tend to be like really like buzzy and like mentally charged in those moments, and I make a very intentional point to balance that with like physically moving my body and like expelling energy, like going on walks, going on runs, like doing yoga, so that I'm like balancing it in that way. I'm like integrating all of that like mental excitedness into like actually wearing out my body so that I can rest, so that I can come back and do it the next day.
Yeah. Sometimes I hear people brag about this idea of like, I don't even sleep because I'm so inspired,
That's crazy.
I mean, yeah, but sometimes it's fun, sometimes it's cool, but like, it seems like, so like this is another, I think that the kind of like, I feel like I'm getting this kind of like, I'm metabolizing your like thoughts and in terms of like ecology a lot. But I see like different forms and different dimensions of ecologies, and I'm seeing that one as like a high-low ecology, where there's like a low being, or deep high, maybe deep. I guess my question. Okay, so like let me put it as a question again, because I'm being a podcaster. So like the like vibrating, like exciting inspiration, the divine spark. Do you see that as? Well, I don't know. Maybe this all falls apart. What am I talking about? But like, I guess like, I'm sorry. I'm breaking this. I'm trying to like figure this out, but I don't think it actually. Okay. I guess my question is like, do you think that like in the times of? I mean, okay, no. I was actually. There's another form of ecology. You talked about this like self versus community. This kind of like, you need to take breaks from community to refresh yourself through art or rest. You need to take breaks from creativity itself to rest, or to, just the cyclical nature. But I guess we also discussed this idea of like kind of like this divine spark. Do you think that the divine spark you get from walking through the woods or navigating ice on Lake Superior, like I'm talking about the beautiful ice that you photograph that makes these incredible different sculptural forms and patterns and textures, does the inspiration that comes from navigating that ecosystem in the real world and the inspiration that comes from deep inner reflection, are those the same quality to you? The same kind of thing? Or are they different?
Both. It's different and the same. It's like the like awareness of like energy, I think. Like I think when I'm walking through the woods and when I'm like next to Lake Superior, I'm kind of like expanding outside of myself a little bit. Like you open your senses in a way in nature that like makes you more aware of all of like the life around you, straight up, just like aliveness, you know, like water and trees and everything moving and buzzing and existing. And when I'm like going really deep inside of myself, the most clarifying moments when I like get creativity or when I like connect to myself in that way is like through emotions. So like I'll be struggling with something really deeply inside myself, and sometimes you don't even know how to like put a feeling into words. You're just like, what is this thing that's in me? And so like I sit with it, I like ask it questions, I like try to locate it in my body, and like I like literally just give it presence and awareness. And I usually come to a point where like it like breaks through. I like come to some truth, some explanation, some movement of that energy that like feels the same in my body as like connecting to that conscious energy outside of me.
Like,
and I think that kind of ties into the idea of like animism that we brought up earlier. Like, it's just that concept that everything is energy, right? Energy is neither created nor destroyed, and water has that energy. Everything has like that flowing through it because it is like matter, and matter is also energy. And it's crazy to think that like we are the only intelligent form of that. If everything is energy and we know that we are intelligent, I have just such a hard time believing that like the energy that flows through us is different on any grand level than the energy that like forms the rest of the universe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that like maybe like from that perspective, I think what I'm trying to get at with like scale and ecology, and I think there's different dimensions to, there's different directions you can think of this, but it's a form of sovereignty that isn't the sovereign as in the royalty. It's not like a king or a queen where you dictate to the rest of the world, or you try to dictate down toward, like, you know, you're a singular point that dictates down on like a conic structure of resonance, but instead it is one in which you absorb and channel forms of resonance that can then be used to align different scales and different patches of reality. Yeah,
I love that concept of like resonance, because that's what it is. Like, you can feel something true in your body. Like, you can feel it kind of like click and align. Like, that's what it does feel like. The way that like when you figure out the question to a puzzle, you like know that you found something true, and you like kind of like you do feel something click within you. It like goes into place, and you're like, oh, that's like what it feels like to like create alignment repeatedly in your life. Is just like so many moments of like, ah, true, like that's what it's supposed to be like. And it's literally frequency. If we're talking about how everything is energy, you are just like aligning frequency. You're creating harmony within your life with the other energies around you and with yourself.
I like that idea of creating harmony. The thing that I hit on sometimes is like is the experience of dissonance, you know? I guess when you say harmony, it's kind of like you don't need to hijack that by using another musical term when you're using it as a metaphor, because like, yeah, you know, harmony and dissonance, or harmony and whatever, like they can interact in ways that are beautiful or harsh, and that can be part of the composition. And that's like okay. That's not, you weren't trying to say that that's not part of it. But I guess like for me it's like I sometimes struggle, to be completely honest, with trusting the feeling of alignment, or yeah, and I wonder if you have I think that it's you know, we live in a tumultuous world, I guess is what I'm trying to say, in a larger sense. And how do you harmonize with that? Like, do you have anything? I don't know.
No, I love that you expressed that, just like struggling to like trust harmony to like exist consistently, because
I think part of it might be me too. It might just be my own, you know.
Sure, but it's also just like a reality check of like there are so many fighting forces in this world, and it's wild to assume that everything will ever be in harmony. But like you said, like discord can be a part of the composition. Like a song is good because there's like moments where like it sounds a little off, or there's an off chord before you reach the final like harmony, you know? And on a large scale, all of the discord that exists within humanity might just be a moment of that in like the scheme of the universe that we know nothing about, right? But I struggle with that too, to be honest with you. Like something that I was like grappling with like this fall was feeling a lot of this feeling in my body of like energetic rushes, and being like, oh my god, this is so exciting, like a lot of things are happening in my life that I genuinely love, and that's a really new feeling. Like that's a new experience, and I don't know how to ground it in. So I would have like a lot of moments of like joy where I would just like scream and giggle and like release it in a really crazy way right away, because I was like, oh my god, this is so new and exciting. And I like did that a lot, to the point where I was like, it kind of feels like I'm trying to like get rid of this. I feel really uncomfortable in this feeling of like joy. What the fuck is that? Like how do I ground that? How do I like create a system within myself where like I don't feel like I need to like expel it right away in like a spasm of body movement, but how can I like feel that rush of pleasure or joy, and how can I like literally distribute it throughout my body and like fill my skin with it to the point where it like infuses my energy and I ground it in, rather than like spasming and like getting uncomfortable. Like I had the conscious shift where I was like, okay, I felt that I had that energy moving through, and I couldn't ground it. I couldn't like let it settle in,
or like hold it, or have a be vessel for it.
Totally, like I just wasn't capable of like holding that frequency. But it, you know, it kept coming. I'm like still cultivating a life that I love, and the more that I get that feeling, I don't feel the need to like squeal and like be like scream it out of me. I just am grateful for it. I feel it, and I let it circulate. and ground it in a little bit more. I don't know if that helps, but it was kind of like a shift energetically for me of like getting used to what that feels like within my own life, and knowing that like I do get to hold that even though there is so much discord on larger scales. Like I get to still like feel aligned and feel pleasure and joy in my own life, even though like on a global scale there's so much none of that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it goes to the core of the idea of like non-innocence, which I think is very important. Like, I don't mean that in a dismissive way or as a way to like besmirch anything. I mean that as like, I think that is one of the ways that we actually can affect, like, be more effective agents, even if you want to look at it from like a militant or utilitarian perspective, is by accepting non-innocence. And that doesn't mean that you're doing anything worse than anybody else who doesn't accept non-innocence. But I'm just saying that like, by doing so, and saying that like it is your right, actually, you know, like you are like, that's part of the sovereignty that I think is interesting to me. That's not a domineering one, but is one of like co-stewardship of the universe. You know, sovereignty being that like you have a sovereign space that you can arrange how you want,
even if it's just your body.
But finding harmony as opposed to dictating something. But like the idea that you have the opportunity to like experience like actual joy within that, and actually savor the joy, and actually like hold the joy. I think that is like a stance that circumvents a lot of the shame cycles that dampen sentiments that can be very effective for various outcomes that we might want to see as mutants in the world.
That's real.
Yeah, I don't know. So yeah, I mean, and I feel like that also goes to like, we talked to, well, you know, just to once again throw in a connection to a previous episode, the last episode that we recorded. Transcending the meme, cutting through the meme and cutting through the sentiment of cringe, you know, on the other side of that, like, truly is, if you like do it with precision and alignment and, you know, deep rootedness, that is potentially like finding those cringe points, like, because I think a lot of people dismiss reflexively the experience of joy, you know. It's like like you were saying, and I think, you know, I think that's something people can respond to, and that's a point where they may cringe originally, you know. So it's like, it's once again like finding vessels to like keep those sentiments, which are like, what else are we doing any of this stuff for? Why would we be thinking our way out of a system if it wasn't to experience joy?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, so I don't know, I feel like all that stuff is very like important, and yeah, I think that's a good like call to action. I mean, it's I think that I appreciate you mirroring back that you have had struggles with holding that sometimes, you know, in addition to kind of laying out what it's been like for you to try to do so.
I think at the end of it, it is just like, you say transcendence, and I think that fits to some extent, but like the soul's experience of this like little human lifetime, I often like think of life from that perspective. Like, I'm not just a human, this is just like the human body I have in this lifetime. And so to like kind of expand a little bit and like think about it on a soul level is to kind of like go into like the emptiness of the abyss, you know? Like, it is like the static buzzing energy that is just like pure life force, that is like the light at the end of the tunnel, like the bliss you feel when you die, like the sensation of orgasm as well. Like, at the end of it, it's all just like reconnecting to that like universal energy that is bigger than us, and the alignment with that energy is creative source.
I like that because it connects to the idea that like the inverse of the thing is the same as the thing in a way, in the sense that like, you know, death, life and death, life and death, but like void and presence
pain is pleasure.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't be alive without death.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that, like, generally speaking, I just am really interested in this navigation of the individual from the individual's perspective, on gating it and creating a portal out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then while maintaining a curated sovereignty that is, I don't know what you want to say, like transcendent doesn't quite say what I want to say, you know?
Right.
But I just think that's a really cool project, and I think that's, I mean, something I aspire to in my own writing. Start with where you're at, and then, like, posit different ways to understand it.
Yeah.
And I think that's just really cool. And then make it accessible to other people so they can see where you're coming from and also have a beautiful time while they do it. Or, like, horrible time. Because I write horror and you're talking about that, you know. People like to make noise music. Like, the idea of it being harsh is also fine.
Yeah.
But, like, it still is an experience that people get something from, and I don't know.
Because you're still, like, creating an experience that's kind of getting them somewhere else. That's the whole thing of a portal.
Mm-hmm. Right. It allows them to get somewhere, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that. I love the idea of, like, the self as a portal.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, if what else it could possibly be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's really cool.
That's cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're working on your book.
Mm-hmm.
You should be done sometime.
Yeah, I'm jumping into production in the next 2 months. So self-publishing a limited edition of hand-bound.
I was going to ask, but I know that you're a bookbinder as well.
Yeah, in June.
You're going to hand bind them.
I'm going to make all of the books. There's probably going to be, like, genuinely about 25 hardcovers, but I'm also going to make a soft cover that's going to be a bit more on the affordable side, because I do want this to be an accessible thing, and those will cost me a lot less to make. So 2 different versions. The limited edition is of the hardcover, and then I will make an infinite amount supplies while supplies last of, like, the soft cover, and that's going to be coming out in June. I'm so excited. It genuinely, the process of, like, finishing a project like this and, like, self-publishing something almost feels like a threshold or, like, a portal of itself. Like, I'm going through so much, like, inner dialogue about, like, what I need to expect, like, putting forward this, like, deep part of myself, and, like, what needs to be shared, what doesn't need to be shared, and, like, what people will think of me. Like, all of that is happening as I'm, like, going through the process of, like, birthing a project, you know? But when it comes down to it, like, as soon as you release it, it's not yours anymore, you know? It becomes a collective experience. Like, everybody experiences art differently. Everybody makes different meaning from it, and that's completely out of my control. So me releasing it is me, like, kind of letting it expand more and grow into, like, a collective thing. And I can't wait to have people experience it and also, like, see how they feel it, how it lands for them, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, it's one of those things where, like, the more personal you get, the more, like, resonance people can find with something. Mm-hmm. And I will say also that, like, it has been interesting following your, like, social media presence because, like, I think that a lot of the things that you talk about on social media and, you know, are related to the topics and themes that you're covering with the book, and also to potentially the process of, like, finishing the book as well. Mm-hmm. And so it's like you get to see the whole, you know, it's kind of like a glimpse behind the curtain, even though, like, that also is part of, like, maybe an expansion of the project in a way.
I like to just, like, bare my soul on all levels. Like, my social media is really just a look into, like, my brain as I'm making creative things, which I don't think is super common.
But there's also some really sick, I will say, like, ice photography. I'm talking about, like, the actual ice, you know.
Water structure.
Like, yeah. And it's, like, really sick, and I really appreciate that. That's really good. So I recommend it. It's The River Runs Deep with one R in the middle.
Yeah. Thanks, Jackie.
Okay, so follow that. That's where you're most active. That's where people can see updates.
That's where I will be, like, launching it or get on my email list. But most of the promo is going to come through that. Yeah.
Email list?
Email list through my website. My website is AhnikaBergPhotography.com. There will be a pop-up asking for your email at some point, and I will also be launching through that, probably with some more, like, little details that might not be social media appropriate. We'll see.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you talking to me again. Yeah, I mean, this stuff is, like, I feel like I faltered a couple times there trying to figure out, like, what questions to ask, because I feel like these things go to a pretty core, quintessential place, and therefore I'm just really glad that, like, thanks for,
It's really intangible, and it's so hard to, like, really coalesce talking about it even, and I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I think we succeeded to some extent, but to another extent, we'll never be able to capture it.
Yeah,
so
right. I mean, right.
We
like, if we can capture it in the conversation, then why would we make art to begin with? Or
exactly.
Whatever else.
Right.
But yeah, I really thank you for, like, trying to chase those tendrils with me. I really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Until next time.
Glad to. Until next time.
Okay. Take care.
If I punch at the machine, will it make a dent before I crack my hand open on the titanium steel and my blood slides off, leaving no stains? If I scream into the void, who are you that listens? After the fires, will I know how to leave what's dead? Sometimes it feels like something went wrong, and that's why we're here, in some kind of cosmic cage or projected reality. But we become in the face of simulations and psyops, and from wrongness spring. Syncretism is for the honorable and dishonorable alike. In thought and in body, no one, not two, in sky and seed sown, we dream up shadows to love through and hold their calloused hands, shaping change in the nether pool from breath to breath and coming up again and again, seeking vistas of freedom. We ground ourselves and study the chaos. The mutant spirit still lives among us. There should be no attempt to fix man, since it is his destiny to be unleashed. Learn from the labyrinths in breathing mountains. Record before flight. And when you plummet back to the mud, how does it feel to dissolve, decay with me? Like the process of radioactive decay in unstable atoms, degeneration yields a more sustainable future. Destruction wages her war to lay with creation.